This is video 83, and the title is A Bull Named Abe. Previous stories covered that I made my spending money when growing up by working for all the farmer neighbors. One farmer who lived over the hill behind us hired me to work full-time when I was 14. I milked cows, baled hay, plowed, harrowed, cut corn, etc. He had 60 head of cattle. One of those was a Holstein bull named Abe. He was stationed in the last spot in the northeast corner of the barn next to the walk-in door. Abe was the biggest bovine I ever saw. With my arms stretched out, my left fingers touching under his brisket, my right hand reached the top of his neck. Abe and I got along. I always gave him a handful of silage and scrubbed his forehead. My boss's name was Donnie, too. His son Laverne was about 11 at the time. He was a little bugger when Dad wasn't around. I'll give you a couple examples. When I would be busy, like washing the udder in preparation to put on a milker, he would whop me in the side of the head with a gob of manure. That was bad enough, but half of it always hit my ear. When I got even, I saw him coming toward the barn, so I stood to the side of the door. When he came through, I grabbed him by the collar and the seat of the pants. He was small and thin, maybe about 80 pounds. I carried him over to the drop. A drop is a trough in the concrete floor directly behind the cows where they drop their excrements. After milking and the cows were let out, I would run the barn cleaner that pulled the manure out of the drop and carried it to a discharge chute where it was deposited into a manure spreader. This day I hadn't done that yet. I carried Laverne horizontally, and yes, I dropped him in the drop. He didn't want me with any more manure. But he harassed Abe. Abe had what you would call today a noticeable package. It resembled two basketballs in a burlap bag. Laverne had a BB gun. I caught him shooting Abe in the package with BBs. Poor Abe would jump about 4 feet. I told Laverne that if I caught him doing that again, that I'd tell his dad. I'm not sure if he did it again or not. At least I didn't catch him at it. I also told him that he'd better hope the bull never gets loose, because he would be smashed into a mud hole. He knows you're the one doing that. When cows came into season, I had to hold the cow by rope tied close to a telephone pole in the barnyard. I would put a rope halter on the cow and hold her nose close to the pole and wrap a clove hitch or two around the pole. Donnie would lead Abe out to service the cow. The first time I experienced this, my eyes bugged out as much as those of the cow. Abe's tool looked about 4 or 5 inches in diameter and about 4 feet long. The cow's tail always stayed straight out for about 3 days before returning to normal. That brings me to my first calving experience. I was in the barn prepping for the evening milking. I was alone. The cow's water broke, and I let her into the calving stall to lay down. The calf birthing started. I knew enough to help by pulling on the front feet when the cow pushed. I tried a number of times to pull it out, but could not. I wasn't strong enough, so I grabbed the rope block and tackle. It had a 1/2-inch rope and was manageable. I still could not get the calf out. I called Donnie on the phone. He didn't live directly on the farm, but down the road some. After about 20 minutes or so, he got there. The two of us had a tough time, but we finally got the calf out. It was too late. It was dead. Its front legs were crossed under its throat and could not breathe. The calf was huge. It weighed 120 pounds. An extra large calf, to be sure. This experience is memorable to me because as I was trying to work with the cow, she actually was crying. I'd never seen that before or since. The tears were running down her face. When it was over, I sat with her a while and wiped and rubbed her face until she was able to stand. Later that week, when all his kids were in school, Donnie had another cow freshen. He was by himself and couldn't get the calf out. He had to call the vet. The two of them could not get it out. The vet ended up taking the calf out in chunks. I'm glad I was not present for that. Abe's calves were too big. Donnie had a younger bull in preparation to replace Abe. At that time, this was a young bull and wasn't tall enough to get the job done. He was pastured behind the main house where Donnie's mom and dad lived. One morning I went out to water the young bull. There was a huge cast iron kettle for his water. It held about 50 gallons. It was kind of like the witch's kettle at Halloween. I carried two 10-gallon buckets out to the kettle, which is only about 2 inches away from the double electric fence. One strand was about knee-high, the other about waist-high. The bull saw me coming and ran up to the kettle. As I started to pour water out of one of those steel 10-gallon buckets, the bull lunged forward and put his head in the kettle. That startled me, and I took a step back just in time to pour that 10 gallons of water down the side of the kettle and on both strands of the electric fence. The kettle was sitting on the ground. Next thing I knew, I was sitting on the ground. The only problem was that when I went down, that 10-gallon steel bucket went up. You guessed it. Not long after my butt was slammed to the ground, the bucket arrived. I just sat there a bit trying to figure out what the heck just happened. Then I heard my boss laughing. He was standing on the porch. He said that I made his week. He hadn't seen anything that funny in a long time. Abe wasn't around much longer. Donnie was feeding Abe one morning and noticed that the skin on his left side was pointing out like a tent pole under a canvas. The evening before it was raining. Donnie's wife and daughters were going to do the milking. I'm not sure where we were at the time. There were 3 bales of hay stacked next to the walk-in door and right next to Abe's stanchion. His younger daughter came in and put her little closed umbrella on the top bale. Abe had licked the umbrella off the bale and swallowed it. The vet removed the umbrella, but Abe was really messed up. They hauled him to the butcher. Before processing him, they weighed him. This I'm sure of. He weighed in right around 2,800 pounds. Old Abe never gave me any trouble. I figured he would get to be retired to the backyard pasture. That just wasn't to be. Well, folks, that concludes my experiences with a bull named Abe. As usual, I wish everyone all the best.